Days at Sea, we have presentations by our university study leaders going on at regular intervals, keeping us occupied and entertained.
For me, it was wonderful to find out there was so much activity incorporated, and essentially it was at your own pace and at the level you wanted.
We encountered an iceberg that was so large, we had to divert our course. We had to actually go around the iceberg.
It took us so much time to get around that on our way to the Antarctic Peninsula that we just went straight to the peninsula.
From all the way left, all the way to the right, it was just iceberg for us, as far as you could see.
And between the Worldwide Quest team and the ship's team, they also made it fun. It was all part of the experience of being on an expedition. You had to expect those kind of changes, and it became part of the adventure.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's events, or perhaps morning, depending on where you're coming from. My name is Justin Peter. I am one of the owners and vice principals of Worldwide Quest, and we are pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, third in our series of several Antarctica-themed webinars for you today. Today's event is called Marine Mammals of the Southern Ocean, and taking things to the extreme with Marc Webber, who will be our speaker, who will be introducing you to in a couple of minutes. I just want to share a little bit of housekeeping first. If you see a slide, or alternately, if you see me speaking, and you see me, my talking head here, but you do not see a slide of the screen with my face, there is at the bottom of the square is the gray bar, the border of your screen, of the window, and there should be three little horizontal lines, or parallel horizontal lines, and if you click on that little button there at the center of that screen, the slide should pop down. So if you see me but you don't see a slide, please try that. I should mention that today's event is being recorded, so if you're unable to attend the entire recording or the entire live webinar, we will have this recorded, and we're going to be sending the recording of today's events to all of the registrants. So fear not, if you have to leave early, that is okay. You will be able to view this again. Today's event is sponsored by a number of fine university alumni associations. You might have heard about today's event through one of these organizations. Perhaps you belong to them, or perhaps you belong to more than one of them. Or perhaps you heard about this event through Worldwide Quest, through us directly. I'll just take a moment to tell you a little bit more about us if you have not heard of Worldwide Quest previously. We are a small travel company based in Toronto, Ontario. We've been operating tours since 1970, and our specialty is small group educational and experiential travel. One of the branches of our company is called Alumni Expeditions, and these are trips that are open to alumni and friends, and anyone who's curious, who wants to continue an adventure in lifelong learning, providing the opportunity to go on small group trips around the world with expert leaders. Today's event on Antarctica, of course, is offered as a prelude to our upcoming Epic Antarctica with the Falcons in South Georgia expedition, which is coming up in the fall of this year. And this is a little bit larger than our typical groups because we're on an expedition vessel. It's a small vessel, maximum 96 travelers. This is actually a photograph from our last expedition for alumni, travelers, and friends last year. And of course, we will be going back this fall, as I said, with a number of expert faculty from some of our partnering universities, Philippe Tartel, Bruno Tremblay, and Brent St. Clair. And so the webinar today, as I mentioned, is part of that series, introducing you to some of our study leaders here, as well as some of our Worldwide Quest naturalists. Today's event, we do actually have one today on marine mammals. I should mention, if you had not heard, that we do have another event on penguins with our Worldwide Quest ornithologist, Catherine Jardine, next week, basically 1 week from today at the same time. If you have not registered, we will be sending out the registration link for this webinar as well, in case you had not already registered. But this will be our 5th in this series. So you can look forward to that. We've traveled with Catherine previously in Antarctica, and she is a font of knowledge on all things related to birds and Antarctic ecology. Today's event, of course, is focusing on marine mammals, which are an important part of what I'll call the charismatic megafauna that we'll be seeing throughout the region here, and are interesting in and of themselves. Today's speaker is Marc Webber, who is an authority on marine mammals, of course, and he will be our mammal specialist aboard our Worldwide Quest expedition coming up in the fall as well. Now, I believe my camera may have frozen here. I'm going to try and bring myself back up here. Marc is, in fact, an author of a book that will be the prize, a door prize for you. And I'm not sure if my camera's working, but I'm just going to persevere. Possibly you cannot see me anymore, but I hope you can hear me. In any event, as I was saying here, excuse me just a second, as Marc, are you there? I'd like to bring on Marc Webber. Of course, Marc is a marine mammal specialist with an undergraduate and graduate degree from San Francisco State University. He's worked as a biologist and refuge manager for nonprofit organizations and the US government for his entire career in places all over the country. Among other accomplishments, Marc has done extensive work with stranded marine mammals, conducted marine mammal and seabird studies by ship and aircraft, and has really traveled around the world in his pursuit of marine mammals. He studied monk seals in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. He has also studied northern fur seals at San Miguel and the Pribilof Islands, walrus in the Bering and Chukchi Seas, harp seas in Russia, and dusky dolphins in New Zealand. And he's also been a general field technician at McMurdo Sound Station in Antarctica, assisting on a variety of projects for 2 field seasons in the early 1980s. And as part of his, the culmination of his interest, of course, as I mentioned, he has co-authored a book, Marine Mammals of the World, a comprehensive guide to their identification. And I just want to double check. I hope you can still all hear me here. I think my camera will not work. Marc, are you there, Marc? Hello, Marc. I hope you can all hear me. I think we're just experiencing a very temporary. Marc, are you there? Thank you, everyone. If you can just bear with us a moment.
Yes, it was just unwilling to unmute. So
that's too bad. We can hear you. Can we see you, Marc?
And I think if I got that started now. Can you see me?
I can see your show, but I don't see your presentation slide.
How about now?
I can see all of your slides.
I apologize.
If you want to choose the show screen option, click that.
I just put in main screen.
Downward arrow and choose your other screen. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
And I apologize. How about now, Justin?
I see a black screen right now.
Okay. It was on main screen before.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go. Do you want to just back up one?
Sure, can do.
Nope. Just go back to what you were doing a second ago. No, we're seeing all of your slides again. There we go. There's the slide. Yeah. Marine mammals of the Southern Ocean. Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. And if you want to just select your show screen, Mark, that would be great.
I'm really sorry about this, Justin. I thought I had done it. Is it now correct?
No, not yet.
Darn. It is somehow not doing what we discussed it would do.
Okay, well, if you want to just try that, try what you did just a minute ago. You want to choose the show screen button and the drop down arrow. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
I'm really sorry about this. Are we there?
No, not quite. You'll need the other screen, Mark. There we go. Great. Mark, we just don't see you. If we could see you, that would be great.
I'm not quite sure how to fix that, but I'm also a little hesitant to tackle further. If you've got the show, then I'd like to just proceed if you'll be able to.
Go right ahead, Mark.
Okay, thank you so much. And I share my apologies for these little technical difficulties. We had done some rehearsals, and believe it or not, it worked, and I'm not quite sure what changed on me. But welcome, everybody. I'm very pleased to have a chance to talk to you today and look forward to getting to meet you on our trip later this year. As Justin said, I'm a marine mammal specialist, and particularly a person who's very interested in the distribution of marine mammals on a global scale. Our field guide project brought that to the world for our version of it, and it's something that we're very, very happy to have completed. We're currently working on a follow-on edition with updates to very important new sightings and details of distribution and of taxonomy. Today's talk, I want to spend on these marine mammals of Antarctica that many of whom we're hoping to see during our trip. We're not sure, of course, until we get there, what we'll see, but we'll spend this trip searching for marine mammals, both from the vessel and from shore as we make landings. And there's a huge diversity of marine mammals in Antarctica. We'll get to that in a moment. But one of the things I wanted to mention about these marine mammals, and this is kind of connected to the idea that you've probably heard and read, that Antarctica is a place of extremes, and it's completely true for its marine mammal fauna. There are just more superlatives to talk about than you can really get through in one talk like this. But I wanted to bring some of the key ones that have always fascinated me to your attention. We have an incredible diversity of orcas in the Southern Hemisphere. There are 5 different forms I'll talk about in a little bit. We have some of the least known small cetaceans in the world. Of all the different kinds of dolphins and porpoises in the world, 2 species that are very poorly known are in the Antarctic, and we have a chance of seeing them and also in subantarctic waters. And your lower left there is a picture of an hourglass dolphin, which is representing one of these 2 kinds. There are many kinds of beaked whales, whales that are not really well known to science in the Southern Ocean, as there are in other oceans in the world, but one with the craziest, and that's not an exaggeration, development of its teeth, of its few remaining teeth, is in the Southern Ocean, called the strap-toothed whale. And I'll show you some pictures of that in just a bit. The largest of the large. We all know that blue whales are the largest animals that have ever lived on the Earth, but the blue whales of the Southern Ocean exceeded in their prime time before they were harvested so intensively the greatest lengths of blue whales anywhere else in the world. So well over 100 feet in the Southern Ocean area. The most abundant whale in the world is the Antarctic minke whale. More than 500,000 thrive in the Southern Oceans. The deepest diving seal is the Southern elephant seal. We hope to get very close to Southern elephant seals to enjoy. They are huge. They're the largest seal in the world as well. And they can dive to well over 2,000 meters, which is extraordinary when you think about it. A mammal, with similar anatomy to us in many respects, but very specialized adaptations, can dive down to unbelievable depths and pressures that it experiences down there. And I hope to talk to you during the course of our trip quite a bit more about adaptations seals have for diving and holding their breath for extraordinary periods of time. And that Southern elephant seal breath holding record is right around 2 hours, almost unimaginable. The most specialized and interesting teeth in the mammal world are given to the crab-eater seal. You see a picture on your lower right. They're very ornate, multi-lobed, and highly specialized for filter feeding in the manner of a whale, but using teeth, where they eat krill using those highly specialized teeth that can filter these small invertebrates out of the water. They too, the crab-eater seal, are the most abundant seal on Earth. Nobody knows exactly how many. It's very difficult to assess in this vast area how many of anything there is, but some estimates take them out to 50 million, whereas more conservative estimates are more like 10 to 15 million. In either case, there are more of them than any other seal, maybe all other seals combined. The most diverse diet of any seal is the leopard seal. It's famous for its predation on penguins. However, it's known to eat fish, krill, squid, and other seals. They will attack other smaller individuals from the other Antarctic seal types, such as the crab-eater seal. And finally, the most abundant fur seal is the Antarctic fur seal. The center of its great abundance is at South Georgia, where there are several million of them that gather up every year. The total population might be in the 5-6 million range or more. So an extraordinary collection of animals down there. And here's just a bit more of an overview of that in detail. You can look at them in terms of their abundance and biodiversity. There are 35 different marine mammals that inhabit Antarctic and subantarctic waters around the world. That's about 26% of all marine mammal diversity. So it's an extraordinarily important and globally significant place for marine mammal distribution. There are about 8 different kinds of baleen whales found in those waters. The sperm whale, there's only one kind of giant sperm whale, and it's down there. 7 different beaked whales, which are those lesser known whales that are deep divers and kind of shy of vessels. They're difficult to see, but we'll put our best effort forward to try and see them as we make our ocean passages. And 8 different dolphins and porpoises from the subantarctic to even the Antarctic, including the killer whale, which is a type of dolphin, the largest form of dolphin. Of the seals and sea lions known as pinnipeds, there are 6 different kinds of fur seals and sea lions in those waters, and 5 different true seals. The 4 Antarctic seals, as they're called, are unique to the Southern Ocean and the Antarctic and subantarctic area. A few times individuals wander away and show up in places like South America, New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa, but their main home is in and around Antarctica. So let's just talk about this place as a habitat for marine mammals. Not going to make this into an oceanography lecture. You've got others who will tell us more about that. But just in terms of marine mammals, we have a couple of major areas of interest to us. One is the subantarctic water mass that will be the water we enter when we leave South America and visit the Falkland Islands. And then the Antarctic water mass, which is really what encircles the Antarctic and is delineated from it by what's called variously a polar front or an Antarctic convergence, an area where water changes in temperature and nature considerably over a very short period of time. And those boundaries and points define critical habitats for our marine mammals, where many of them are found in one zone or the other, or occasionally or seasonally wander between them. And we'll cover that in more detail as we get to know some of these animals and see them on our travels. Also, beyond the water masses, Antarctica is, of course, a place that is dominated by ice and snow. However, the ice of the land is not what we're talking about now. We're talking about the ice of the ocean, sea ice that seasonally forms and then breaks up. So in the winter, you can see on the left the massive extent of sea ice. It reaches an incredible extent away from the continent, and all of that is habitat. All of that ice, and a number of species actually depend on it and live their lives in association with these seasonal changes that influence where they can live, where they can forage, and even the productivity of the water as the ice breaks up. And it certainly provides them with a wonderful, many of these amphibious animals, the seals, with a wonderful substrate for getting out of the water, hauling out and resting, and between foraging activity, and to help, in some cases at least, avoid their predators, such as killer whales. So let's talk about killer whales a little bit. Here we see one just kind of breaking surface and kind of a little bit of a spooky kind of an aura about it, just the water coming off its face as it comes at you. The diversity of killer whales is a really interesting topic in marine mammal taxonomy right now. And there's a lot of work being done on several different types. But what has happened is that scientists who work on the taxonomy of these creatures have divided them into these at least 10 different ecotypes. It's a term you might or might not have heard, but it isn't a term that defines a species. It's a term that defines how a creature like these orcas fits into its habitat. It's a collection of its characteristics that define it, such as its foraging, its distribution, its social behavior, its vocalizations. Those are all characteristics that help us to separate these animals into distinct types. And it turns out they do a pretty good job of doing that themselves, as most of these ecotypes don't interact with each other, and they've become genetically isolated from one another and are on their path to speciation. So they're kind of on the path to becoming something new and different. In the Antarctic, if you look at the left side of this slide, there are 5 whales depicted, 5 killer whale types. We have a chance of seeing 4, and there are more killer whales in the Southern Ocean, more different ecotypes than all of the rest of the world, while the same if you add up all the rest in the world as far as is known today. So, and we have a chance of seeing 4 of these types. The Ross Sea number 4 is not one we would see or could see, but the others are there, and they all have specializations. The type A's of the top picture are whale hunting specialists. The type B of the pack ice are seal specialists. The Gerlach number 3 is a fish eating specialist. And we don't really know what the subantarctic killer whale type 5 or type D number 5 is known for, although it's thought to be a marine mammal predator. Notice there's subtle differences that if you look carefully at, like the orientation and size of the eye patch. Is it straight or angular, large or small? Color, dark black or kind of gray to olive or in tone with a band across the top of the back. All of these features, including also shape of the dorsal fin, will help us delineate the different types. And we'll do our best to see what we can find when we're underway and on our trip throughout different habitats. And I just wanted to share a couple of pictures with you of orcas doing what they do. There is a picture on the top, and you may have seen some of this. It's become popularized of late, where orcas are able to hunt in the pack ice really creatively because they can't use their echolocation capabilities, which is basically biological sonar, to hunt them in the water when they're hauled out. So they've taken to patrolling around ice floes and spy hopping or spying out, raising their heads up and using their eyes to gain reconnaissance of who's up on top of ice floes. So packs of orcas will travel amongst the ice, the floes, and searching for seals. And when they find them, they'll try and upset the floe one way or another, crashing down on top of it, swimming at it rapidly and diving under, creating a wave that can flip an ice floe or knock a seal off. And a good friend of mine and co-author, Bob Pittman, has done quite a bit of research on that. He took the top picture that you see of this activity underway with metal seal. In the bottom right is from an Antarctic tour with a group of orcas stalking a crab eater seal. On the lower left, you can see this lovely photo. This happens to be from Norway, but a beautiful photo of a large pod of orcas, and they are often called pods because of their rather social connections and generational connections. There are long lineages of orcas that stay together throughout their lives and through multiple generations. And you can see this group moving along underwater. Beautiful picture from the famous photographer Paul Nicklin of National Geographic. Some of the smaller cetaceans are very interesting in their own right. And again, as I mentioned earlier, have the distinction of being some of the least well-known small cetaceans in the world. The hourglass dolphin, upper left, lower left, is an oceanic dolphin related to some temperate forms, but living solely in the subantarctic and Antarctic. And because of its and the other animals you see here, habitat preference, it rarely washes ashore. You've probably all heard of how scientists, whale and dolphin scientists, learn a lot from animals that wash in and become stranded. Well, these animals probably would as well, except there's very little landmass in the Southern Ocean in their habitat zone. for them to go ashore to strand upon once they die. So we have very few carcasses have come in for study, relatively few specimens in museums, and basics about how long they live, when do they first reproduce, what they eat are extremely, our knowledge is extremely limited for these and this animal on the right, which is a true porpoise called a spectacled porpoise. And the two lower pictures on the right are not problems. There's nothing wrong with those. In fact, this is a highly dimorphic species, and the upper left is either a female or a youngster, and the lower right are what the adult male looks like later in life, this great overgrowth of a dorsal fin, and all of this coming on a porpoise. It's about 6 feet 2 meters in length. So it's a very small animal with a gigantic fin, very hard to see, very shy and elusive. But if we work hard together, and especially with the efforts of our probably super observant birders on our trip that we'll be sharing with on our trip on deck, we just have a chance to see some of these animals. And the more eyes searching, the better. So we all encourage you to spend all time on deck that you can and help us in our search for these really interesting mammals. This is a picture or a set of pictures of one of the most unusual beaked whales in the world, and it has a distinction of really having some of the most unusual teeth. This is called the strap-toothed whale. They're actually possible to see. Most beaked whales are elusive and shy and deep diving, but there are numerous observations that come from trips crossing like the Drake Passage and the Scotia Sea these days. And so we just have to be observant and on our toes. But notice this is a female on the lower left, but particularly I want to draw your attention to the upper right picture of a skull from a museum. Look at these incredible teeth. These are modified lower jaw teeth. They are now known as tusks. Notice too, the whale has no other teeth. These are its only remaining teeth. And as they grow, these mature males have teeth that wrap over the top of their rostrum. They crisscross over the top with tiny points used for scratching each other in combat. So these are fighting armature, but they also have this strange effect of causing a very limited capability of opening the mouth, which apparently is all that they need for their diet of squid, which they can presumably suction up into their mouths through a very narrow opening. So this is a quite normal case for this whale to have this extraordinary overgrowth of teeth across the top of its jaws, called the strap-toothed whale. I wanted to give you this view of all of the cetaceans of the world, all the whales, and to put the blue whale in perspective. We'll talk about the blue whale next for a few moments, but here you see all of the whales, dolphins, porpoises, beaked whales, everybody. River dolphins are on here as well. And the blue whale just is a giant amongst all of them. It's the largest animal that's ever lived, followed by the fin whale and the sei whale and the humpback and the sperm whale, which are all whales we have a chance of seeing. Probably the humpback may be the most best chance of a whale species, but we will keep our eyes open as we make our passages. The blue whales tend to be out in the oceanic parts of our trip, looking for swarms of krill, their favorite food, to lunge feed upon. And I'll just show you a little bit of, I wanted to also just tell you as a bit of background, and we'll talk a little bit more about general whale biology during the course of the trip, but most of the large whale species and populations are highly migratory. And I want to draw your attention to the area we'll be visiting, southern South America, Falkland, South Georgia, and the Antarctic Peninsula. And you see here in the case of humpback whales, which this is showing us, there's long migration from calving areas. They spend their winters, their southern winter in northern South America, Central America, having their young. Then they undertake a lengthy migration to get back to their rich foraging areas in the Southern Ocean, particularly around the Antarctic Peninsula. Others from the other side of South America make a shorter trip, but similarly are calving in higher latitudes and foraging in lower latitudes. And this shows you some of how most of the Southern Hemisphere's whales, large whales, make migration trips by migrating to the Southern Ocean areas and various different latitudes to find their preferred foods, which are primarily in the Southern Ocean krill. I haven't talked about that much, but the dominant member of the food chain for many marine mammals. If you don't eat krill, you probably eat something that eats krill. It's that important in the Southern Ocean ecosystem. Here's a picture by the famous photographer from the Shackleton expedition, Frank Hurley, of a whale, a blue whale ashore at Grytviken, the famous whaling station on South Georgia, one of several. But you can see, just to get a perspective on the enormous size of blue whales. And there was a considerable impact on the ecosystem, the entire ecosystem of the Southern Ocean by whaling in the late 19th and 20th centuries, early 20th centuries, where it's estimated that as many as 2 million of all kinds of whales were taken, from blue whales down to minke whales, from the Southern Ocean. As they depleted the largest types, they went after the next largest types. And it was pretty much a sequential collapse of the whale fauna in the Southern Ocean as a result of human activities. We will have a chance to talk about whaling by visiting Grytviken on South Georgia is a normal stop, and seeing some of the ruins of some of the old station there, and it's in tremendous historic importance to whaling and Antarctic exploration. Here's a few views of southern or Antarctic blue whales. Again, the largest type of blue whale in the world. There are 5 different types of blue whales at least that have been recognized by taxonomists, and some pictures are coming out of the Antarctic now, and where there might be as many as 5 or so thousand animals. There are people working on them, finding them acoustically, visually. They make booming vocalizations. So many marine mammal surveys are done now, not just by vision, but by deploying buoys and recording animals and their presence and movements. These photos show you some of these blue whales returning into Antarctic waters, or repopulating is a better word. They didn't go anywhere. Their numbers were just diminished to extremely low levels. But they are making a comeback, which is great news for whales, for the ecosystem in general as well. On the upper right, just to draw attention to what you're seeing, which is kind of a confusing picture, that blue whale is lunge feeding, which is what they are specialists at doing. The mouth is open, top of the head is to the right. This is the lower jaw mass, and this is the throat extending out with the massive influx of water into the mouth. And we'll spend some time talking about just how baleen whales make their living. It's an extraordinary set of adaptations that they have to go about foraging on vast quantities of small marine animals as their food source. So this animal is lunging away from you, filling its throat with mouth and presumably prey before it slams its mouth shut and filters, using its baleen plates, the organisms from the water mix in its mouth. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Antarctic minke whales. I'm jumping around a little bit, but to cover some of the items that were mentioned in the intro slide, just to show you some of their wide distribution. They're primarily in the Southern Ocean, but some have wandered even to the north. It's kind of some bits of riddles that need to be sorted out, but they are primarily in the Southern Ocean. They're one of the smallest baleen whales, although most abundant. About 500,000 of them are thought to be around. For those of you who've seen minke whales in the Northern Hemisphere, or maybe around Australia, where you might see a dwarf minke whale, there's been some popular tourism going on there with swimming with these guys. And the common minke whale is in both the Atlantic and the Pacific, and is frequently seen on whale watching trips in those areas. In contrast, the Antarctic minke whale is a slightly different creature, certainly a different species, but different looking creature. Notice that one key characteristic of the other minke whales is a band of white on the flipper. And so during our course of our trip, we're going to talk about subtleties and identification features of many kinds of marine mammals, so you can tell them apart. And here is one of those details and one of those subtleties, where the Antarctic minke whale has some variations in color pattern around its body, but very distinctively lacks this white blaze on the pectoral flipper that it does not have in common with its other closest relatives, the other types of minke whales. Here are a couple of views of them. They live out in the open ocean where they forage on krill, but they also wander in and amongst the pack ice, where they also can find quantities of krill. So they are an animal that has numerous habitat preferences and moves as the food supply and availability shifts. They show up as groups at times. They're fairly social animals, and when they're about their business, they can be relatively approachable when they're foraging and things like that. So we look forward to chances to see Antarctic minke whales. Okay, I wanted to do another change of gears and talk to you a little bit about one of my favorite groups of marine mammals, the pinnipeds, the seals, sea lions, and walrus. And just as a quick overview, there are 3 different kinds. There are the true seals, as they're called, which are represented in the Antarctic by many types, but here's a crab-eater seal as an example. They are seals that are long-bodied and they look a bit like torpedoes. Their flippers in the back are used for propulsion for the most part, and they scull them from side to side, as you see with this common or harbor seal, which you have on both coasts of Canada. And here as a northern elephant seal, you can see that the front flippers are, in most of them, are relatively short. Now, there are exceptions to these criteria, and we'll talk about that when it comes to things like leopard seals, but in the Antarctic. But in general, these are some characteristics of these seals. They cannot climb or walk on land. They crawl on their bellies and sort of bounce along as they get moving faster. So their primary habitat is flat surface ice and beaches. They don't climb up on rocky shorelines or any steep elevations. The sea lion family, which includes the fur seals, and we should see fur seals, quite a few fur seals on this trip, and possibly some sea lions. These are not Antarctic species. These are just some of my favorite images from some of my other travels and research. There are 3 images of northern fur seals, upper left, upper right, and lower. These are the fur seal famous from the Pribilof Islands, and a California sea lion in the middle, which makes its way to British Columbia, Canada, on its migrations. These are to show you that these seals are built entirely differently. They have long wing-like or oar-like front flippers. Hind flippers can be rotated under the body to enable walking and climbing, as you see on the upper right. In water, they swim with powerful strokes of their front flippers in the manner of a bird or a penguin flying along. Birds in air, penguins in water, but you get the idea. These long paddle-like front flippers are the main source of propulsion, and they're a lot more built like a land animal than a seal. That is, they have still a little bit of the hint of their bear-like ancestry and connections in their long neck and strong shoulders as you see them moving around. They do give you an idea of a very amphibious terrestrial animal versus a fully marine or exclusively kind of marine animal. And lastly, we won't spend any time on this creature, but there is a third type of pinniped, the walrus, which occurs both in the Pacific and the Atlantic. So none of them in the Antarctic. There's a lot of stuff kids see, people see, as we all saw when we were growing up, right? Of polar bears and penguins and walruses and penguins. And these are just fantasies of various stories and cartoons and things like that. Never the two shall meet. This is strictly an Arctic creature, as are polar bears. Okay, let's talk a little bit about an extraordinary seal, the southern elephant seal, one of 2 kinds of elephant seal. There's a northern form in the North Pacific, and then this southern elephant seal, which is circumpolar in the southern oceans, particularly residing in subantarctic waters, although there's a huge colony of them at South Georgia. And we are going to be traveling at a great time to see them because it's going to be at the peak of their breeding season. So we should see the incredibly large males, possibly getting into some combat with females and pups as well present at the colonies. So it's a great time to visit South Georgia, a great time to learn about and experience southern elephant seals. These guys, as a reminder again, are as kind of lethargic as they look. They're some of the most incredible animals in the ocean environment. You'd probably be amazed to know, if you think about the ocean and how cold and forbidding it is to us, and how very little of it we can explore as mammals. These animals spend about 70% of their lives, well, almost 90% of their lives at sea, entire lives. And so they come ashore to give birth. All seals do that, or at least ice. Nobody can give birth in the water. No seal can be born in the water and survive. But other than that, and to shed their fur once a year, these animals are fully marine. And so huge amount of their lives at sea. And then once at sea, they are spending more than 70% of their lives below 100 meters. If you think about that, 100 meters, we can't go to 100 meters, not without extraordinary devices, only briefly. It's an incredible depth to consider, the pressure just there alone, and then take it to their maximum diving depth of 2,100 meters or so. It's just off the chart for kind of comprehension of how a mammal, especially one that looks like it can barely get up and down the beach, can perform at sea. So really great stories to tell with southern elephant seals. Crab-eater seals, that hugely abundant species. Here's some views of them. We may see them in groups at sea. They're one of the few pinnipeds that will travel in large aggregations at sea, looking like a school of dolphins or something at times, motoring along to get to different foraging areas. you see a beautiful face of this animal on the upper right. And on the left, those markings are interesting because for a long time, people thought, well, you know, killer whales attack crab-eater seals. Those must be evidence of killer whale attacks. And many crab-eater seals have them. In fact, a majority of crab-eater seals have bare scars. Well, it turns out that these are actually scars inflicted by leopard seals. Some careful research was done to measure distances between scars, and they match up with adult leopard seal canine teeth distances. So many crab-eater seals are exposed to attempted predation by leopard seals at various points in their lives as newly independent weanlings, and as they grow to maturity. Not sure of the impact of leopard seals on adult crab-eater seals, but along the way, it's probably a perilous journey in their lives to make it to adulthood. The redness you see on the ice is actually not blood. In this case, it is actually fecal remains. Crab-eater seals eating almost exclusively krill have their feces be red tainted or tinted. So, and I think that's going to show up in the next slide as well. Yep, you can see some of it here. Now, this seal is bloodied in the lower right because they do fight with one another during their breeding season. Males will bite at each other's faces extensively, and they get all scarred up in their head and face area. But this here is from a seal defecating out on the sea ice. And here you get to see in the lower left these amazingly set of adaptations for their dental structure. This arcade of teeth, the lobes on these are the canines. The post-canine teeth are the most ornate in the mammal world. And you can also see a very interesting little accessory adaptation, a bump on the lower jaw, the mandible, which blocks off, some of the back of the mouth, so that when these animals are engulfing and bringing and sucking in krill into the mouths and pushing the water through these ornate teeth, even the back of the jaw is not a point of escape, easy escape for their krill prey because it's blocked by a ridge of jawbone. So an incredible adaptation for this highly specialized forager, the crab-eater seal. Doesn't eat crabs, got a crazy bit of naming going on there. It's a krill-eating specialist. And leopard seals, how could we have a talk about the Antarctic and not mention leopard seals, but I brought them up especially because of their diverse diets. We think of them so much so in their role as penguin predators, and they're very good at that, and are obviously brought to our attention in numerous documentaries for their abilities to chase down and capture penguins, including the largest penguins, emperor penguins. But believe it or not, they have a diverse diet. Leopard seals can take on krill, they can take on other seals, fish, and squid. So these are the ultimate survivalists of Antarctic seals. We haven't talked about climate and climate change. I'm not going to spend any time on that really to speak of, but just leave it to say in some publications that look at the threat of climate change to the Antarctic, which is multifaceted in its wildlife. The leopard seal may be the seal that has the best chance of enduring change because they occupy so many habitats and has the ability, flexible foragers have the ability to take so many different types of prey. We hope that it doesn't come to that in the future, that capability needs to be taken advantage of for survival, for pure survival in the face of change. Cross our fingers. Just wanted to show you a map to show you a very widespread seal I wanted to talk about next, this highly abundant Antarctic fur seal. We will see them in great numbers at their largest colony, which is, South Georgia, about here. We can see them and should see them down in the Antarctic Peninsula area where they travel to forage and to spend time away from their colonies. And then they migrate throughout this large sub-Antarctic and Antarctic range and show up as wandering animals to even South America, where they can even hybridize. And I'll talk about that in just a second with other kinds of fur seals. Here's what they look like. They're highly sexually dimorphic. That is that male Antarctic fur seals get to be quite a bit larger than their female counterparts, about a 5-to-1 difference in mass. So it's pretty extreme. And they do form rookeries or colonies ashore where males defend territories, females come ashore, give birth to their pups, here in this case, a pup right here, and then make foraging trips back and forth to raise, in the process of raising that pup. All of it really interesting ecological dynamics, behavioral activity, and ecological dynamics going on. We should see quite a few subadult Antarctic fur seals as well. Here are a couple of young males learning the ropes of interacting with each other and fighting. A young male here amongst the tussock grass on South Georgia, and one that is showing what few other sea lion fur seal types will do, which is it will use ice as a resting substrate. It will haul out, especially in the winter, but wherever there's pack ice in Antarctic fur seals, they can possibly haul out and rest ashore on that ice. Getting out of the water has an advantage. That water is extremely cold, and so when you're not actively traveling or foraging, you're on a good feeding patch and you don't need more at the moment. Get out of the water and rest and save some thermal stress. When traveling at speed, they will porpoise, which looks like a dolphin leaping, or a penguin will do this as well. Many penguins will do this, and this has to do with speed of travel in the water, where it becomes more efficient to literally leap into the less viscous medium of the air to proceed at high speed. So this is an adaptation, a traveling adaptation for high speed travel, is to actually porpoise. And smaller marine mammals can do this. The largest ones cannot, but most of the seals, certainly the younger sea lions, that is, and fur seals can do it. And then you see here, I want to go back to this picture on the lower right. You see a interesting color variation going on here. If you compare this seal to the smaller seal in the upper left, that's an adult female. This is an adult female. She's in a golden phase, which is a low percentage color phase. That's a normal, just infrequent coloration pattern or variation, a honey color, genetic variation that can occur in both females and males. And it isn't seemingly costing them any survival value, because you see fully grown adult animals in this color phase. So we'll keep an eye out for this. It's a beautiful looking animal to witness, is to see them in this fully kind of golden color mixed in amongst the darker, normally colored individuals. And just a kind of a current topic in marine mammal esoterica and biology, though very fascinating to me, is that many of the southern fur seals, who were all hunted to near extinction, as was the southern elephant seal, but the southern fur seals hunted to near extinction for their pelts around the southern oceans, numerous types have all recovered. None of them went extinct, and most are becoming fully recovered. And as they've recovered and re-inhabited their former range, they've spilled into each other's habitat zones, and hybridization has been happening on a very large scale, particularly in the Southern Ocean south of Australia, where you see these mixed variations of fur seals. Here's a New Zealand and an Antarctic fur seal cross of a male, a sub-Antarctic and Antarctic fur seal cross of a female. And here you see in South American waters, a Juan Fernandez fur seal and Antarctic fur seal cross. So I bring this up, it's not something we are likely to run into, but it is a really interesting aspect of the biology of these species recovering from considerable exploitation, how we've interrupted the course of their evolution potentially or possibly in a pattern which is creating now a mixing that otherwise didn't historically occur to any extent that we know of. So just kind of a fascinating sidebar about the effects of human activity, especially exploitation in the past. And of course, we're experiencing human effects now with climate, as I said, and other variables. So we'll be very mindful of the impacts this will have on marine mammal populations. And we'll have a chance to talk about some of that during the trip. There we go. So we're jumping back to whales. I just wanted to, at the end of the talk here, and getting close to the end, and I'll go more quickly now, I wanted to jump back into talking about some of the other diversity we can encounter and should see, have a good chance of seeing. Throughout the Southern Ocean, sperm whales make trips to the Southern Ocean and forage by diving deeply on squid. Squid is a very important component of the Antarctic ecosystem. Here you see some individuals in some upper pictures. None of these are from the Antarctic. Typically in the Antarctic, we'll see large individual bulls rather than larger groups or mothers with calves, although, excuse me, in my voice, they will wander into the southern subantarctic and southern areas on occasion. Typically, though, you see more of the lone, large adult male, as you might see in the upper right, and their distinctive blow from the end of the front of the head that projects forward into the left. So they're readily identifiable in the field with a good look, despite the fact that they will dive and spend a lot of time away from the surface. When they come up, they tend to ventilate for numerous minutes, breath one right after the other. So these little blows or puffy blows can stay up and persist up at the surface for long spells. There are other kinds of dolphins in the Southern Ocean around South America. There are Peale's dolphins in waters around the Falklands and Southern South America, as well as dusky dolphins. I did my master's research on dusky dolphins in New Zealand, so they're near and dear to me, and I'm hoping we can see some. These are a little more oceanic in their nature, close to shore, but then wandering farther offshore, whereas Peale's dolphins love the areas close into shore in fjords and around islands. So, and you can see here in this lower left, this is in the Falklands, right around the kelp forest. So we have a chance of seeing these guys as we make as our journey winds its way through the Falkland Islands. Some more views of dusky dolphins, just to give you an idea of some of the stuff we were doing in the Southern Ocean at New Zealand. And Hector's dolphin. This is a dolphin that is a beautiful dolphin. It's been kept in captivity. It's a small dolphin. It's more like a porpoise than anything else in terms of viewing it, but it is a true dolphin. And they're beautifully piebald in color, big white blazes with a black back. And these dolphins can be seen throughout the subantarctic, although our best chances are as we approach and enter Falkland waters and depart Falkland waters. That's a place where they are known to kind of aggregate. Other large whales that we could see on our trip include fin whales, the second largest species. They have a distinctive pattern of color. They are asymmetric. The lower jaw on the right is white or a light gray, and the left side is dark just like the dark of the top of the head. So very strangely marked. One of the few, maybe the only large mammal that's asymmetrically colored in the world is the fin whale. And these were particularly abundant in the Southern Ocean, and were set upon because of their large size after blue whales were depleted as the next largest whale species for the whalers to take. And then the third largest is the sei whale. You can see widespread in colder waters of the world, and a medium-sized whale with a very erect dorsal fin. So very slender in general compared to the other fin and blue whales, and a bit of an arch to the jaw. Sei whales are particularly interesting because not only do they lunge feed in the manner of a baleen whale with throat grooves, but they can also skim feed in the manner of a right whale. So they are a whale that can take on two different feeding modalities to maximize their foraging opportunities. Everybody loves a humpback whale. This is not a Southern Ocean picture, and you'll know why in a second. It's just a favorite picture of mine. Had to throw it in as I started to talk about humpback whales. But widespread whale, and a whale that's quite abundant in the Southern Ocean. Already outlined a bit about their migratory pattern. And here's a little bit more on that, just to show you globally how they concentrate in the tropics and subtropics in the respective winter of their hemisphere, and then disperse to foraging areas in the summer of their respective hemisphere. The key point here being that Southern Ocean humpbacks and Northern Hemisphere humpbacks, let's say right close adjoining here, they don't mix because they're not in the same place at the same time. They're out of sync by as much as 6 months of timing for their presence in Central American and Northern South American waters. So despite the fact that both venture there for calving, they just don't mix. They're isolated from one from the other by seasonal differences in their movements. And here's some of the differences in their appearance. Northern humpback whales, many of you have probably seen these creatures on whale watching trips or from shore, coastal views. They're particularly popular now in the whale watching industry and seen in many parts of the world. The Southern Hemisphere, however, the ones we'll see in the Antarctic are colored quite differently than the ones you might be familiar with from the Northern Hemisphere. Notice that the tops of the pectoral flippers, which can be dark as well in Northerns, but variably have quite a bit of white, is pretty much absent in the Southern Ocean. And notice also this large amount of white coming up from the ventrum onto the sides, the flanks of the animal, which we don't see in Northern Hemisphere's whales, which remain all dark. So quite a bit of difference in their coloration between the two hemispheres. Otherwise, about the same size. One of the things we'll be doing during the trip, and encouraging you to do if you bring along a camera, which we strongly encourage you to do, is to try and photograph humpback whale in particular flukes, well, anything, but in particular, humpbacks are known for they're very photogenic. They'll cooperatively raise their flukes frequently when foraging and diving. When we take pictures of these flukes, we find, and you probably all heard of this, that fluke ID is possible because of lifetime distinctive color patterns. Each individual whale has a pattern that does not change through life, although they can accumulate scars and nicks and notches, the basic underlying color pattern remains the same for life. So we can use that as scientists and as community scientists, citizen scientists, as you could very easily become, should you be willing. And that is to collect these kinds of photographs and submit them to any number of researchers or the website called Happy Whale. Great name. And they share with scientists all over the world, and they document individual whales. Here's one of the fun things about this. You're helping science, and you can choose to become connected to a whale you submit, photographs of a whale you submit, and Happy Whale will dutifully notify you whenever that whale is seen again and wherever it is seen. So it's a great opportunity for you to help science and for science to do a little payback to you for your efforts, that you can connect yourself to a whale or whales for their life, as long as you're interested, as long as Happy Whale survives out there in the world. It's very easy to do, and we'll talk more about that. It's kind of fun. It's a lot of fun, and we encourage everyone to take as many photos as they can and contribute them where they're useful. Okay, back to seals for a moment, just to add a few more seals into the equation. There are Weddell seals in the Antarctic and subantarctic, a very interesting seal. Most of what we know about seal diving physiology has come from studies in nature of Weddell seals, and we'll talk about that during the trip. I hope to do a special segment on diving physiology for you. Weddell seals can dive 600 plus meters in this icy cold water where they feed on, they're a fish specialist. You don't hear much about that in the Antarctic, but this is a giant ice fish, a fish with naturally occurring antifreeze in its blood that the seal will bring up from these great depths and dives that can be as long as an hour down under the ocean. So an incredible seal that lives right in amongst the up to the Antarctic continent in what's called fast ice, but we should also see them around islands and pack ice where some of them disperse, those that aren't living along the continent. Here you see some of the same, well, the same image on the lower right, but I wanted to draw your attention particularly to, and I apologize for the typo above, the upper right, where you see a Weddell seal on the right and a crab eater seal on the same space interacting with each other. And you can see that the crab eater has a distinctively longer head and muzzle than the rather shortened muzzle and head of the Weddell seal. And there are coloration differences as well. But Weddell seals are very large and long-bodied with a relatively small head. And we'll spend some time on deck and on islands sorting out the differences between these two and also the leopard seal in particular. There is a fourth seal in the Antarctic, the Ross seal. I have never seen one. I'd love to see one. They typically live in denser packed ice than tourism trips generally voyage into, although they can wander, and we'll keep our fingers crossed, but I'll be extraordinarily pleased and happy if we could see one. But it is an interesting and little known seal of the Antarctic called the Ross seal. And finally, just about done here, we'll just talk about a few of the pinnipeds we could see closer into South America, around the Falkland Islands, such as the Antarctic fur seal, a relative of, the South American fur seal, and Antarctica, the relative of the, let's get a little tongue-tied at the end here, the South American fur seal, a relative of the Antarctic fur seal. And one of the things that fur seals will do at sea, all fur seals will rest or sleep at the surface when conditions permit and warrant, and they will raise their flippers up in a sharking kind of position, or lay them over each other in what's sometimes called a jug handle position. Imagine lifting a jug out of the water. You grab those two draped over flippers and lift. There are many South American fur seals in southern South America and in the Falkland Islands. And I think I will bring up South American sea lions, just to mention that they are in the Drake Passage in the Strait of Magellan and in the Falkland Islands. And they're really an odd looking sea lion. Those of you from Canada who may have gone west and seen stellar sea lions will say that doesn't look anything like a sea lion. I've seen maybe the light color, but notice the massive mane that the adult males have and really robust neck, head, and shoulders. They're not as big as our stellar sea lions of North America, the North Pacific, but extraordinarily different looking creatures, and they form colonies and will occur widely. Interestingly, these South American sea lions are also predators on penguins, as are some of the other fur seals. So they will double duty as not only fish and squid eaters, but when they can get them, as they patrol, some of the individuals patrol around colonies of penguins, they will attack and consume penguins as part of their normal diet. Okay, everybody, thank you. Went through pretty quickly. I wanted to pause there, stop there, and turn it back over to Justin. And I think he's going to moderate any questions you might have. Happy to take them. I'm sorry about the visual. Justin, you might be muted still.
Thank you, Mark. And it looks like my camera is now showing. And perhaps you can see my screen here. Thank you so much, Mark, for that informative and quick introduction to the mammals of the Southern Ocean. We'll be looking forward to seeing all of those, of course, on our trip, which is featuring Falkland, South Georgia, and Antarctica proper. We will be getting to our prizes. We do have the door prize, the book that Mark co-authored, Marine Mammals of the World. And I'll tell you just a little bit more about the expedition. But are there questions? We do have a questions tab in your GoToWebinar console in that little rectangle that you should have to the side of your screen. There's a little questions tab there. And if you click on the right facing arrow, you'll have a spot where you can enter questions. So I will have a look at the questions there. Mark, as we are, right, I'm going to be I'll be curating the questions that are here. And let's just see what we have. I'll wait. If anyone has any questions there, you can put them in there. I do have one question. I noticed, of course, you talked very fascinating about the crab-eater seal with the scars on the bottom. I'm assuming that was an adult crab-eater seal that got those scars when it was younger. And so what I'm understanding from you is that, because crab-eater seals and leopard seals can be about the same size, in the same range, I think. What I'm understanding is that scar is so deep or so lasting that it lives with the crab-eater seal as it reaches adulthood. Is that what I understand correctly?
Yeah, most of that is right on point. The crab-eater seals, as they're injured, these are deep gouges or scrapes, and they do persist as scars through life. And that crab-eater that I showed was of an adult crab-eater seal. Now, one thing, just a small correction, the leopard seal does, especially adult females, get quite a bit bigger than crab-eater seals. They are, in fact, the Antarctic seals, I mentioned sexual dimorphism just to take that to a point. The Antarctic seals, leopard, crab-eater, Weddell, Ross, are all what are sometimes termed reverse sexually dimorphic, where females do grow larger than adult males. So leopard seals are quite large, adult female leopard seals are quite large, and compared to even crab-eater seals, quite a bit larger.
All right, because when I was there on my second trip in Antarctica, we saw a leopard seal and a crab-eater seal, same size, resting on an ice floe together, side by side. They seemed unbothered by each other. So I'm assuming when there's size parity, there's no real threat to the crab-eater seal to be alongside a leopard seal.
Yeah, I would think so. I've looked at many of them hauled out like this, and I don't think the predation activity happens on ice or on islands, for that matter. I think it happens when there are encounters in the water, swimming encounters, which is where leopard seal predation is, primarily practiced. I think they chase around penguins on ice a bit, but they primarily chase them very effectively in the water with powerful strokes of their front flippers. They're an exception to the rule that seals propel true seals with their hind flippers. They use all four flippers, and they make very sweeping movements with their front flippers, like in the manner of a sea lion or a fur seal, to chase underwater. So they're very agile, very fast predators. So in your sighting of similar sized animals, I would, just as a guess, would attribute to possibly a subadult or even a male leopard seal, a younger male leopard seal, which is more similar in size to a crab-eater seal. Still at full size, a bit larger, but nothing like an adult female leopard would be.
Interesting, very, very interesting to know. Now, we do have a question from our audience here. Donna is asking, if we're thinking of food chains, would orcas be on top, or would the leopard seal be on equal footing?
Well, it depends which type of ecotype of orca the leopard seal runs into, I suppose. There are seal specialists amongst these ecotypes, mentioned, and you may not remember it, you can go back to the slideshow on the recording, but the type Bs are seal specialists. Now, there are other orcas that are fish eaters, for example, and the little Gerlache orca that we have a chance of seeing, the Gerlache straight orca, the Gerlache straight being part of the Antarctic Peninsula, upper Antarctic Peninsula. So in the same habitat space, they would be both top predators, but where these type B orcas, the seal specialists, occur, then, well, I think the orca would take the top post as at top of the food chain. They can pretty much take on anything they want. They are seal specialists. They're not pretty much going to spend much attention to whales, but they are at top of the food chain. It's very interesting, and a lot of this work is also happening in other places where there are orcas, that these, not only do orcas, as you may have heard from your Pacific Northwest that we share up there in Alaska and Canada, there are residents and transients and offshores. It gets confusing, and the offshores the transients, excuse me, being mammal eaters. But within those mammal eating groups, there are specialists, and some learn to specialize on sea lions, others on whales, others on porpoises. So within the mammal eating orcas, or an ecotype of orcas, there are specialists within that. So the more you dig and the deeper you look, the really more interesting and complicated it kind of gets.
Interesting. I have an interesting question here from our naturalist aboard our 2022 expedition, Chris Early, who was there with me, and he's mentioning a sighting that we had. He's saying on our 2022 tour, we saw a pod of what we thought were type B orcas, so they're the seal-eating orcas, if I understand you correctly. We saw them right after seeing two Antarctic minke whales speeding away from the area. Do seal-eating orcas sometimes eat small whales as well, or are the whales not good at differentiating the different types of orcas? Can they see which one's a threat to them or not, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when a naturalist answers a question, well, that's a great question, he's going to kind of have to guess a little, or she, because at least I don't have a perfect answer. But, and hi, Chris, great to hear from you. Chris and I traveled on one of Worldwide Quest's trips to Baja. I really enjoyed meeting the group and especially working with Chris. The orca ecotypes are characterized by different vocalizations. So not only there are physical and genetic differences and dietary differences and other behavioral differences, but there are vocalization differences. And it's clear that at least some marine mammals can detect these, pay attention to these vocalizations. So for example, again, in the Salish sea waters in your British Columbia, to bring it closer to home, resident orcas are fish specialists, and harbor seals in those waters pretty much ignore resident orcas vocalizing away. They know what a resident orca sounds like, and they know they're pretty much at no threat from it. So they go about their business. Now, transient orcas, the mammal eaters of that area, and other mammal eaters tend to be a little more stealthy and don't broadcast their presence unless they're socializing, but when they're on the hunt, they tend to be quieter. You'd have to have had a hydrophone down to know. Otherwise, it's hard to know whether the two types even really knew each other's presence well. Whether the type Bs would switch to a whale, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to dig a little deeper. You see, you stumped me a little bit on that. They're pretty much known as a seal specialist, but I don't know that they're exclusively going to avoid whales. Excellent.
Well, we're all about lifelong learning, so there's also something else for us to know. And I'll take one more question here before we get to our door prize. Vinay is asking, he's asking what kind of mammals can be seen in early February? And I guess the more general question is, what are the differences in seasonality of any of the marine mammals in the Antarctic region?
Well, that is a very good question as well. I think some of these animals, they just shift latitudinally. Some are migratory, obviously, and as I mentioned, are coming very much seasonally to the location. Others who are more residential shift a bit latitudinally with the expansion of pack ice and with the seasons, so that you'll see them in farther northern areas as they're pushed, like the dolphins, for example, and beaked whales are pushed out of some of these more southern waters by fairly continuous pack ice cover. So the February differences would be that there will be far less ice, and you'll be down into lower quantities of pack ice in the Antarctic Peninsula region and the upper Weddell Sea. You'll have to travel farther to get farther into pack ice. Their whales will travel and stay within that pack ice. The humpbacks and minke whales in particular prefer to feed on krill in that ice habitat. So they will be deeper into the Antarctic space than they will be during our trip. In our trip, We're going to be arriving at a great time, as I mentioned, for elephant seals. Other whales will be just arriving in the Antarctic space or habitat space, and we'll have to search them out in amongst the pack ice. And depending on where and the extent to where the ice is and our wanderings in the Antarctic Peninsula will dictate what and where we find it. There should be plenty of Antarctic seals around. Well, leopard seals are also seen around South Georgia. There are some that specialize in living there year round. And also, though, in the pack ice of the Antarctic Peninsula, along with wet-eel and crab-eater seals.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Now, of course, just to say it once again, if you would like to learn much more about marine mammals, we'll be traveling with Marc on our expedition to the Southern Ocean, with Antarctica with Falcons in South Georgia next October, November. And that is an expedition that is being promoted by a number of different Canadian University Alumni Associations. So you can be a graduate or one of these schools, or simply interested in continuing your lifelong learning and exploring this amazing region. Of course, Antarctica being the focus, but you'll be blown away, I think, by South Georgia and impressed by the Falcons as well. So it's really a trifecta of key areas in the Southern Ocean. And we want to thank our participating schools for promoting today's event. And that the dates on that Antarctic expedition are these here. So October 24th to November 13th, 2024. It's a chance to see the great variety of habitats in this region. A very fun and I would say rewarding trip. And just a quick reminder that we do have one more, so far we have one more webinar in our series next week. At this time, you can meet Catherine Jardine, who will be talking about penguins, which are the world's, let's say, perfect predators. Catherine will be also joining us aboard our expedition next year. Finally, I would like to get to, or rather later this season, not next year. It's come upon us fast. 2024 has come upon us fast. I did want to draw the name for our prize. In fact, we have two prizes. We have the main prize here. We have a surprise prize. So in case you don't win this book, I am going to ask my colleague Vishwa in the background to draw a name for someone who is still here with us, who's waited patiently. Vishwa, can you draw me a name for the winner of our grand prize here, Marine Mammals of the World with Marc Webber? And drum roll, please. The winner is Debbie Furness. Congratulations, Debbie. You can expect to receive this in the mail. We'll check in with you to make sure we have a correct address. And we have a surprise second door prize. One of our webinar attendees is an Antarctic aficionado, so much so that he's been inspired with a collaborator to make Antarctica-inspired music. I had hoped to play this music at the beginning of the event prior to that short video. Unfortunately, it looks like the sound was also not working, among a couple of other things. It's called Shades of Antarctica, a number of Antarctic-inspired instrumental pieces. You can actually view this at www.shadesofantarctica.com. And the lucky winner of this prize is, drum roll please, Ian Doris. Ian, if you're there, you can look forward to receiving this in the mail from us. So thanks once again. This event was recorded. Everyone will receive a link to the recording of this event. If you have any questions, please let us know, whether about Worldwide Quest generally, this Antarctic expedition, or if there's anything else we can assist you with. Thanks very much. Thank you again, Marc, for being our speaker today. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you.